Okay, so the PlayStation 5 has been out for almost 4 years already, and the fact that it's holding up as well as it has is incredibly wild. And you might also be thinking, since the PlayStation 5 is rumored to be just around the corner, you might be wondering, is it worth waiting, or is it okay getting the PlayStation 5 right now as it is? And I will say there's a lot of tech that I absolutely love, and I actively appreciate on the daily, and since the PlayStation 5 is a part of that tech, I figured it'd be a good time to take another dive right into it for a longer term review, since honestly it's changed quite a bit since its release. Now, for reference on where I'm coming from as a gamer, I've been a PC gamer primarily for the last 10 to 15 years, up until the launch of the PlayStation 5 and Series X and Series S and all of that. And honestly, before those systems, the only way to get high refresh, good looking gaming was on the PC side of things. And the thing is, the reason the PlayStation 5 is so special for me at least, is that it brings that whole high refresh experience, but in an entirely different way. With time at least, the PlayStation 5 for me has become my go-to gaming machine, mainly due to the fact that it just simply works. And I'm not sure if it's going to be the same for anybody else, but for myself at least, there's just an immense amount of value to be had from just picking up a controller, melting into my couch, and just gaming at the end of a long day. Whether that day was glorious, super shitty, exhausting, or whatever else there's somewhere in between, gaming has usually been my way to decompress at the end of that day, and it's been perfect on the PlayStation 5. The real special thing too for the PlayStation 5 is whenever you turn it on, it's pretty much just there for having a good time or some sort of relaxation. There's no emails, browsers, or apps that can sort of pull my attention away, just full-on relaxation, whether that be media or gaming. And honestly, you pair that with the quality of all the exclusives on the PlayStation side of things, it's straight up badass, no question. And I know it's mostly playful when people call it the dad station, but I think it's kind of badass the fact that these are the guys who grew up in the 90s or 2000s, they'd flip on the PlayStation 1 and just have a good time. And the fact that you're doing that now on the PlayStation 5, for me, is just a little bit special, as unique as that might be. And I'm sure I definitely can't speak for everybody else, but for me, in my world at least, there's a huge appeal to this system in the fact that it's not a PC, which means no drivers, no launchers, settings in different locations. You just gotta press play. If we are talking specs though, for the price of what you're getting with the PlayStation 5, it's actually extremely competitive. I'll leave a little pop-up here on both sides talking about what the specs are for the PS5 and what an equivalent PC would look like. Without going too deep into it either though, if you are looking to build out a similar PC, you'd probably be looking somewhere between the RTX 2070 or the 3060 Ti sort of GPU. And as for the CPU, that could be a Ryzen 5 or Ryzen 7 or something similar. And honestly, when it comes to that, I could be completely wrong. My source is random people on the internet alongside ChatGPT, but let me know what you guys think the PlayStation 5 PC equivalent would be. Either way though, the starting price of a PlayStation 5 right now is about $450 when it's not on sale, which is still quite a lot cheaper than a PC build at the equivalent spec, which again can run you about $800 to $1,000 depending on what sort of system you're building out. And before you roast me, trust me, I know a PC does more than a PlayStation 5. Editing, work, media, all the other programs, and everything in between when it comes down to PC, it obviously does more. But if your only consideration is gaming at an affordable price and having it look damn good at the same time, the PlayStation 5 really does fit that bill pretty well. With that, there are a couple compromises I personally don't like, which is probably the storage you get right out of box. I originally thought 1 terabyte or whatever the usable amount is would be pretty decent, but the second you throw down a game like Call of Duty, you're gonna need 100 gigs just for that update, and it drives me nuts, so I'm usually playing some sort of give or take, uninstalling and transferring stuff. But you can always expand that with an SSD, which is what I've done, and that's easily the best way to get around that problem. And the second thing that drives me nuts about the PS5 is, hypothetically, from a spec standpoint, this system could probably drive a higher refresh rate for certain games, even if it's at just 1080p. So I really do wish it wasn't software locked at 120 FPS, even if it is just for 1080p. Apart from all of that, with the specs that you do get with the system, how does it actually perform when it's gaming? This is where it sort of depends on what sort of game you're playing, but on the PlayStation 5, it should give you 4K gaming somewhere between 30 and 60 FPS, and even some titles can push up to 120 FPS. When it does come down to 1440p, you will get somewhere between 60 and 120 FPS, which is usually the sweet spot for most people, especially for those of you with a 1440p desk setup perhaps. And again, when it comes down to 1080p, it's going to be the same as 1440. You will be getting somewhere between 60 and 120 FPS depending on what game you're playing. And fun fact, if you didn't already know, the PlayStation 5 didn't support 1440p at launch, which again is probably the reason why everything is software locked at 120 FPS in the first place, again, which is a bit of a bummer. From what I've read at least, the console experience favors stability and experience at all costs, even if it means capping your system at 120 FPS, even if it's at 1080p. It kind of makes sense to me because that's sort of one of the things that I'm talking about, that it just simply works all the time. But again, I wish there was some sort of feature or option to just turn that off if you didn't want it. Still, I sort of understand it at the same time. With all this in mind, I know the PC purists absolutely love to shit on console, whether it's PS5, Xbox, whatever it might be, because it's not native 4K, but I'm pretty certain anybody really buying a PS5 simply doesn't care, or it's just not that big a deal and the games still look incredible even if they are upscaled and not native 4K. Again, I'm a bit of a PC nerd myself, and I still don't really think my PlayStation 5 is any less incredible, since at the end of it all, gaming really is just gaming. With that, I've only owned the PS5 since 2021, as they were near impossible to get at that time, but since then I have had the absolute pleasure of playing so many good titles. Let me know what your favorites are. Here are some of mine. My typical go-to when it comes to FPS games has been Call of Duty or Overwatch, since they're easy to pick up and down whenever I'm low on time, and again, the high refresh experience was something I only had on PC up until that point. And another game that was a pleasant surprise for me was X-Defiant, which is pretty much the love child for Call of Duty and Overwatch. And as somebody who loves Overwatch on PC, I still find the console experience far less sweaty, and it is more relaxing to still play Overwatch but not try as hard. For FPS games too, when it comes down to that HDMI 2.1 port on the PS5, that's going to give you those new fancy features like VRR and auto low latency mode. Again, those features were previously only available on gaming PCs. Now that it is in the console space though, auto low latency mode makes your controller inputs near instant, which is perfect when it comes down to any sort of competitive gaming. Not to mention variable refresh rate smooths out all of your frames and even unlocks certain games to have a higher refresh rate. I absolutely love this feature. And even outside of FPS games, you do have some of those PlayStation exclusives that are cinematic as hell with incredible stories. Right now I'm playing through Last of Us Part 2 for the first time, which has me absolutely hooked. That one scene at the beginning, I'm surprised the internet didn't ruin that for me, because what the hell, I was not expecting that. Still, it's an incredible game and I cannot wait to finish it. And then of course there's all the other titles like God of War Ragnarok, Ghost of Tsushima, Spider-Man 2. Honestly, these games I wish I could forget the stories just so I can replay them again. And it's not just the exclusives as well, since there's all these other fun ass games I love like Fortnite or Hogwarts Legacy, which I'm finally coming up on the platinum for. And I can confidently say the experience on the PlayStation 5 wouldn't be quite as good as it is if it wasn't for the DualSense controllers. This one is from Sony themselves, and this is a third-party controller, and both are incredible when it comes down to gaming. Before the PS5, I wouldn't have ever thought just a controller would drive the experience even further. Honestly, the ridiculous haptics of the controller just add to the fidelity, gameplay, and sounds of whatever game you're in. When you fire a weapon, grapple an opponent, pull a bowstring, or whatever else, it all has some sort of unique feedback on the controller, whether it's resistance on the triggers, a unique rumble, or even a small sound effect through the tiny speaker built right into the controller. This controller makes me feel like an old man in the future, because this still blows my mind away even 3 years later. That and the controller has a built-in flipping microphone, which is simply one less thing to worry about. Even still, it's also easy to forget that plugging a headset into the controller has never been easier with the 3.5mm jack, and that's perfect for any sort of FPS games. And the one thing I can say I'm not the biggest fan on is probably the battery life. Even though it is rechargeable, that battery does take a hit over time the more times you charge it. But for me, at least in my living room, it's so much easier to just throw it on the dock and not have to worry about the battery, which is always a plus. And if you're in a desk setup like myself half the time, you can always just plug in a USB-C and just game without worrying about the battery. And naturally, of course, whenever you think about the PlayStation 5, you're probably gonna just jump your mind to gaming right away. But if anybody at all, even in the slightest, is considering any sort of Google streaming stick or an Apple TV, the PlayStation 5 is a seriously great competitive option when it comes down to any sort of living room media. And overall, it does such a great job. From a media standpoint at least, this system is incredible for supporting HDR10 for both content and gaming. But something to note is that there is no Dolby Vision on here like you would find on the Series X or the Apple TV. But for more normal people like myself, HDR10 is probably good enough. With that, content on here is well optimized and it just looks incredible. And thanks again to you guys for your suggestions on Demon Slayer. I'm officially addicted and I really do love this show. I appreciate the recommendation. And while navigating PS5 with any sort of DualSense is super easy, there is a media remote that I haven't had the chance to check out yet, and I'm still on the fence about whether I should pick that up, but it does look super easy if you do want the traditional TV and remote setup. Apart from that, from a media standpoint, one of the things I haven't really cared about in the past has been the Blu-ray player. As somebody who started collecting physical media in the form of vinyl records, I've been dabbling with the idea of getting a Blu-ray library going, but I'm not too sure if it's worth it. If anybody else has started that, please let me know if you think it's a good idea. When it comes down to a quality standpoint, I hear Blu-ray is just the way to go and there's nothing else that quite matches it. Plus, I'm sort of getting fatigued by all the streaming services. Apart from that though, what sort of ties into the whole media and stuff is the actual UI on the PS5 and all the apps that are available. Again, the apps on the PS5 aren't the ones that are going to pull your attention for any any sort of work or productivity, which I absolutely love. But even navigating the system is just straight up snappy as hell, and it's an easy way to make an older TV a lot quicker. For me, what really does it is just the unwavering smoothness and reliability of these native apps on the PS5. Again, just like the gaming, it simply works. And as somebody who has an Apple TV, I find the experience super close in terms of performance, and I really do appreciate that. Plus, using something like Apple TV in the living room to just play music is super chill. And as a whole, Netflix, Prime, and Disney Plus, and anything else you might want is all there if you want it. And then there's all the other stuff I've fallen in love with that make the PS5 even greater. Again, half of this stuff wasn't even available on launch, so it's even more badass now than then. First easy thing, honestly, is just the native Discord integration. It's just one of those things that used to be, again, a PC-only feature that makes gaming with friends a whole lot easier. And I keep saying it, it simply works. The second thing I've got to say is being able to take the full gaming experience remote with the PlayStation Portal. I don't know what sort of wizardry is in this thing, but honestly, it's just really flippin' reliable. For myself, with very limited time, I find the PlayStation Portal a perfect way to snag 10 to 15 minutes of gaming, and I do appreciate it for that. And what ties to my Portal and PS5 both are the new wireless options that have come out. I'm using the Pulse Explore earbuds, which do connect by dongle to my PS5. They connect through some sort of wireless to my Portal. And the fact that I can also do Bluetooth at the same time with another device is absolutely incredible. And then there's just the simple versatility of the PlayStation 5 itself. As a whole, it just looks great in all the different ways you can customize it. You can put it in a desk setup with a monitor. You can take it with you away to college or school or whatever else because it's small enough. And of course, all those badass TV living room setups. It really is an absolute banger of a system, which is why I still use it more than my gaming PC, despite being a huge power gap between the two of them. And that might be hard for some people to believe, or maybe I'm just some sort of weirdo. With that though, the PlayStation 5 is a little bit old at this point. Again, pushing almost 4 years and all, and with the rumored PS5 around the corner, should you wait? When it comes down to waiting, my honest thought is that if you are looking to get a PlayStation 5 right now, maybe wait 1 or 2 months tops. Considering the PS5 Pro is expected to come out this November or December for the holiday season, we would be hearing about it within those next 2 months. So if you're not really in a rush, definitely maybe wait those 1 or 2 months. And if we don't hear anything, the obvious choice would be to get a PS5, because even if it's 1 or 2 years down the road, you will get a hell of a lot of good use out of it. And it's always better to just not talk yourself out of a good time. But let me know what you guys think down below. Should you grab a PS5 now or wait for the PS5 Pro? If you did watch to the end of the video, I appreciate you sticking around. Consider dropping a like or a subscribe because it goes a long way. Thanks again. Till next time.